Hi, in this video we're going to be looking at some sample questions and answers for part 1 of the IELTS speaking test. The topic of the questions we're looking at today are on TV programs. Quite a common topic that a lot of you might have seen before come up in part 1 of the IELTS speaking test, so it's worth having a look at. The styles of question are kind of the typical styles of question that you see come up in part 1, so they might not be that surprising, but they are designed to surprise you a little. So again, it's good to see these different styles of questions and how we approach them in our answers. What I'll do first is just show you the 4 questions, think about what they are asking us to do, and then we'll look at some sample answers to those questions. And finally, I'll just give a quick analysis of those sample answers to show you some of the really good things that we're doing in those answers that are the kind of things that a very kind of high level answer should be doing. The kind of answer that a band 9 level student would be giving. So let's have a look at these 4 questions. Now, the first one you can see here asks, where do you usually watch TV programs? Now, if you ask me, this question is quite strange, but it is one that does come up in the IELTS speaking test. Where do you usually watch TV programs? And I guess here it's assuming that you might not just be watching them on TV at home. There are other devices that you can use to watch TV programs. Things like your mobile phone or an iPad, something like this. So I'm guessing that that's what this kind of question is asking you when it focuses on where, the location. And of course, kind of a word that often comes up in these part 1 questions is usually, right? Questions about your routine, what you usually do, to see if you can talk about your routine activities. So a kind of classic style of part 1 question there, but of course it's a bit surprising that it focuses on the location, where. But again, we're going to have to give a nice clear answer to that in our answer. Now, the second question, if you see here, asks you, what's your favorite TV program? Personally, I don't really like these kind of questions that ask you about your favorites, because I always think it's a bit difficult to pick one. But they are this common style of question that does come up in the IELTS speaking test, asking you for your favorites. Again, of course, the focus is you because it's in part 1, and the topic, TV program. So you're going to have to give at least one TV program or type of TV program that you like to watch and explain a little bit why. Again, with these types of questions, you can see here the ones we've looked at so far have all focused on the present tenses. Nothing mixed up with other tenses so far, but it's quite common that they do mix up tenses in these part 1 questions, and we will see one in a minute that does ask us to focus on a different tense, but not the next one. Here, the third question is asking, are there any programs you don't like watching? So this is kind of the opposite of the previous question. In the previous question, we were talking about, or we were asked about what our favorite TV program is. So a TV program we really like. And then the next one, it's asking us about TV programs we don't like watching. So of course, we've got to answer that and give maybe some examples of the programs we don't like. Now, if we move on to the final question, that's got a slightly different focus, because here it's actually asking us about the future, not the present. And like I said, this is a common thing for questions in part 1 to do. They will focus on a mix of tenses, sometimes asking you about the present, sometimes about the past, sometimes the future. And this one is asking us about the future. Do you think that you will watch more or fewer TV programs in the future? Really makes it very, very clear that they're asking you to talk about the future there. So of course, in your response, you need to focus on the future and whether we'll watch more or fewer TV programs. So there we go. Those are the 4 questions there we're using in today's video. And what I'll do next is just show you some sample answers to these questions. Now, hopefully you'll see in the sample answers the way we're answering them in quite a clear and concise way. Nothing too complicated in the answers you're going to see here, but really that's what we're meant to do in part 1, is just give nice, clear and fluent answers. We don't need to show off too much in part 1. You've got to remember these are simple questions that require simple answers. You don't need to do anything too amazing in these answers, but of course, like I said, the sample answers I'm showing you are showing a very kind of high level response in terms of part 1 responses. And I'll explain some of the good things that we're doing in these responses that is going to kind of impress the examiner. But you've got to remember, in part 1, really here, we're just focusing on clearly answering the question and responding nice and fluently. Anyway, let's get on and have a look at these answers. So if we go to that first question, where do you usually watch TV programs? Most of the time I'll watch TV at home in my living room. It's where my TV is, and I don't really use any other kind of device to watch TV with. I guess I'm kind of old-fashioned. What's your favourite TV program? I wouldn't say I have a favourite, but I do enjoy shows about food and travel. These types of programs help me to wind down at the end of a long day and inspire me to go to new places or eat things I've never tried before. Are there any programs you don't like watching? Yes, I don't really like to watch the news on TV anymore. It tends to be a bit depressing, and I can follow what's happening in the world from other sources. Do you think you will watch more or fewer TV programs in the future? I imagine I'll probably watch TV less in the future because TV in a traditional sense is gradually becoming less popular. I also think I'm going to have less time in the not too distant future, as my wife is expecting. Okay, there we go. So I went through those quite quickly, but hopefully you could see there how they were nice, short, simple answers, and they might have been showing off some vocabulary that you're a bit unaware of maybe. Some of it's a bit less common, but really nothing too complex there. And of course, I wasn't really trying too hard in the answers to impress. I was just giving kind of a nice natural response to these kinds of simple part 1 questions. So if I just point out a few things in these answers that I think were quite good and kind of impressing the examiner, and that would kind of encourage them to give us a high band score. Of course, kind of the band score you get in the IELTS speaking test is based on all 3 parts together. So there's no way you can get a really high band score just for one part. But they are the kinds of answers that, you know, a very high level student would be giving. So that first answer I gave to the question, where do you usually watch TV programs? You can see in the first sentence here, we've began by saying most of the time. Of course, this is actually a nice way of paraphrasing the word usually. Instead of saying usually, we can say most of the time. Now, I would say you don't always have to be thinking about paraphrasing the question in the answer. It's not something you want to waste time with, really. But, you know, if you can, then it is worth doing a bit because it's one of the requirements for getting a very high band score. So you can see we've done that there. We've changed usually to most of the time. And then we've said, I'll watch TV at home in my living room. So given the location, we've answered directly there. One thing you might be questioning in your mind here is why I've said I'll watch TV. Looks like future simple tense, making a contraction between I and will and saying I'll. And this does look a bit strange, I guess, but for native speakers of English, it is actually quite common to answer questions on the present simple tense, what you usually do with this future simple tense. It's a normal thing that we do, and of course we're not actually talking about the future, we're talking about our routine, but it's very common to do this and something that's okay to do in the test. Of course you could say I watch instead of I'll watch, but it's just showing you another option there. Now, of course, we give a second sentence in that answer, which kind of explains a bit, goes into a little bit more detail. I always think this is worth doing in part one if you can. Otherwise, the answer's a bit too short. So we've said it's where my TV is, right? We've explained why we're watching TV programs there in my living room because, well, that's where the TV is. And I don't really use any other kind of device to watch TV with. So we've just given a reason there, really quite simple. And then we've explained a bit more at the end by saying, I guess I'm kind of old-fashioned. A nice use of the adjective old-fashioned there to describe someone who, well, does things that people used to do a lot in the past and maybe hasn't changed to do anything that maybe young people in the present like to do. So describing myself as a bit old-fashioned there. So if we move to the second sample answer I gave to the second question, the question was, what's your favorite TV program? Again, we've given a 2-sentence answer. This one does, of course, look a bit longer than the previous one. But we've answered it again pretty directly. We focused on the question. You can see words from the question in the answer there. Remember, you don't always have to paraphrase. I wouldn't say I have a favorite. So it's okay to answer like this. If you can't really think of a specific favorite, you can say, well, I don't really have a favorite. We said, I wouldn't say I have a favorite, using the word favorite from the question there. But, and this is the important thing, that we do say something afterwards. So we've contrasted that and we've said, but I do enjoy. There, actually, this is interesting because we've got two verbs together here, do and enjoy, and it's quite common for native speakers to do this when they're talking about things they enjoy. I do enjoy. I do enjoy shows about food and travel. So we've given kind of a couple of types of TV program that we really like, that we enjoy. Then we've got a second sentence that explains that a bit. Like I said, it's always good to go into a bit more detail and speak a bit more in these part one answers, but of course not too much. So we've linked the second sentence with the first sentence here. We've said these types of programs. So of course I'm linking with the food and travel programs I mentioned in the previous sentence. Then we've said help me to wind down at the end of a long day. So something a bit interesting here, I guess, in terms of vocabulary, we've got the phrasal verb wind down, which just means relax. So to relax at the end of a long day. And we've added a bit more detail at the end here, and inspire me to go to new places or eat things I've never tried before. So a bit of variation there in tense at the end there. You can see I've never tried before. So actually we're using the present perfect there. Not something you have to focus on too much, but naturally we've just moved into a slightly different tense there, but still focused on the present in that answer. Okay, if we move on and look at the third question and the sample answer for that. If you remember, the question was, are there any programs you don't like watching? So you can see here in the answer, we've given a nice direct and clear yes, because of course it's an are there question. And I quite like to do this. You don't have to, but it does bring focus to your answer when you have a question like this, to say yes or no at the beginning. So we said, yes, I don't really like to watch the news on TV anymore. So we've given the type of program that we don't like watching. And then we've given a reason for that straight away afterwards. It tends to be a bit depressing. So we've described that type of program with the adjective depressing. And I can follow what's happening in the world from other sources. Nothing too amazing there, but of course we've given the reason why. The verb follow for kind of the news, we follow the news. And again, we've not repeated the word news, we've said what's happening in the world there. So of course, a little bit of paraphrasing that's quite good to do. Now, finally, we've got the fourth question and answer. Now, the question was, do you think you'll watch more or fewer TV programs in the future? So it's about the future, this question. So you can see at the beginning here, we've made sure we've shown the examiner we understand that by starting our answer with I imagine. A great way to start answering a question that's asking you about the future, to show you're not sure, it's the future, I imagine. And then straight away after that, using the future simple tense, I'll, right? Joining I and will together. I'll probably watch less TV in the future. So of course, actually here we haven't had to copy the word fewer from the question because we're not comparing the noun TV programs, which of course the countable noun we would have to use fewer. We're just saying watch TV and then less. So we're comparing the verb watch there. So we don't need to use fewer, we can use less. But then we've used that phrase from the question in the future and then given a reason with the word because here. Because TV in a traditional sense, so of course, right, the way we think of TV, in the past, right, not thinking about using other devices to watch it, is gradually becoming less popular. So of course, we're using actually here the present continuous for talking about something that's happening now into the future is gradually becoming less popular. So we've given the direct reason there. And we're also extending that with a second sentence. I also think I'm going to. So of course here we're using the future simple, but using a different way of using future simple. Instead of I'll or I will, we said I'm going to. So there we go. It's just a different way in showing that we know that. So I'm going to have less time in the not too distant future. So again, we have repeated in the future here, but we've said not too distant, which of course really means the near future, not a long time from now. Distant future, of course, means a very long time from now. And then we said, as my wife is expecting. Of course, I think for some people this might seem a bit confusing. They might be thinking, well, expecting what? But this phrase, to be expecting, in this context, means to be pregnant, expecting to have a baby. But we don't actually need to use that phrase because that word on its own could be used as an adjective to mean, well, pregnant. So that would be a good reason for why we wouldn't have much free time to be watching TV. Anyway, so there we go. That is the 4 sample answers to these questions on TV programs. And hopefully there's stuff in those answers that is going to help you with your own answers that you can give to these types of questions. If the sample answers were useful to you, then do remember to click the like button. It does help. And if you haven't already, remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any similar videos in the future. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.